It's finally time to start talking about typography, which I really love working with in Photoshop. To work with typography, we need to go and bring up some of our type layer windows. Okay, so if we go to Window, we need to find the one that says Character. Okay, so there's Character and there's Paragraph. If you just click on Character, it's going to bring up both. You'll get Character and Paragraph. Now, just to show you a little bit around this window, we have over here are all of our fonts. And you'll notice that I have quite a few more fonts than maybe you do by default. And that's okay because I'm a professional designer and I'm buying fonts and finding new fonts daily and weekly. Okay, so that's okay. I'll show you where I get my fonts most of the time right now. So if we open up my browser here, we have two sites that I would highly recommend, and I'll put them into your resources. First of all is Font Squirrel, and these fonts are all free, which is really nice. But the thing about free fonts is that they're usually not crafted as well as the fonts that you have to pay for. Sometimes they are, but usually they're not. I would highly recommend that you get better quality fonts that you're actually paying for. And to do so, I always go to myfonts.com, and you can search by what the hot fonts are right now. They have popular tags down here for you to search for fonts. And whenever you find a font, you can simply just purchase and download it right here in My Fonts. And you'll see some fonts are more expensive than others. I usually buy fonts by weight, so I just buy one weight that I like the most at a time, which is this one's about $35. It's not too unreasonable, but if you bought the whole package, it gets kind of pricey. It's $494. Up to you what you want to do. If you'd rather just purchase some free fonts for this class especially, go right ahead. All right, let's go back to Photoshop and start working with some type. So I'm going to pick one of my favorite fonts. Doesn't matter which one. You can use whatever you'd like. I personally really like the font Brandon Grotesque. That's my favorite font. It's quite nice. Highly recommend it, but you probably don't have that font on your computer, and that's okay. You can use whatever font you'd like. So to bring up my type tool, which is over here in my toolbar, I just click it or press T. Easy as that. Just press T. And I can just click anywhere on my canvas and start typing something. And I'm sure you're wondering why it's not showing up, and that's simply because I have a color of white selected by default, and I want to change that. Now if I click the color and change it now, my font's not actually going to change because I have the cursor at the end. So what it would be trying to do is change anything I type from now on into red, which we don't want. We want to do the whole thing. So I could either select it all by clicking and dragging like I would with text on a page paragraph, or I can just click away, go back to my move tool, move it around. I'm sure you can't see that I'm moving around, and then change the color to red that way. All right. So by default, let's just show you what some of these things do. I'm going to type a little bit more though. Okay. So I'm going to press Return, Enter, and then type something else. Enter, type something else. Little typo there, sorry. Perfect. Okay, so I go back to my move tool and I can move this type around. And as you'll notice, I have some other settings over here in my character window. I have size, which is simply just the size of my type. I can resize it. This here is how big the spacing between each of these lines of rows of text are. So if I do auto, it gives you a nice arrangement here of how Photoshop thinks it will look nicest. I can up that or down it. My type is 60 points, so you always want it to be at least that or higher. So 60 or higher. So if I do 100 point, you can see that's really spaced out. But if I do 60 point, it's pretty tight, and it's just to where it's touching because that number matches the number of the size of my font. Okay. This one over here is letter spacing, so if I do 100, you can see that the letters are each spaced out pretty far apart. If I do a negative number, you can see that they're smushed up together. Pretty nice. Okay, if I click this, it takes it to bold, makes the text bold, but it's faux bold. It's just adding some extra color around it. It's not actually the bold version of the font, okay? Just so you know. This is italic, and again, this is faux italic. So if you didn't buy an italic version of a font, you can just do faux italic. And if you didn't buy the bold version of a font, you can just do faux bold. But a lot of times this really doesn't look very good, so be very careful when using this. Next up, we have all caps, which if you typed something and you want to turn it into caps, you could do that. Thing that I like to do is to make it really small. So if I did like 24 and then I like to space it out apart at about 100. And I think that looks kind of nice sometimes for headlines, for designs. Alright, so that's it for just typing. We can underline, we can cross through. Clicking these unapplies all of those things, which is helpful. Okay, so as we move on, let's make some paragraphs. I'm going to delete this first. In order to make paragraphs, I need to go back to my type tool by pressing T or selecting it over here in the toolbar, and I just click and drag, and now I can type something inside this box. Okay? Something else. Alright, so that's just how we make paragraphs. And now if I click and drag this box around, I can resize and the text will format automatically. If I go over to my paragraph window, you can see there are a few formatting things, but first, in order to format, I need to go back to the Move tool, and then I can format to do centered aligned, right aligned, I can do justified, all sorts of things. By default, Photoshop turns things on to hyphenate, so if something's running off the line, it has to bump on to the next, it will hyphenate that for you. I like to usually turn it off, but it depends on a case-by-case basis. By default, it looks like it's on, so you can keep it on if you want. Now, if we're dealing with larger bodies of text, I'm going to make my paragraph box a little larger. Click away. Make my text just a little bit smaller. That's way too small. Let's go 24. All right. So I'm going to highlight this and delete it. Now, something that Creative Cloud has, also I believe CS6 has, but earlier versions of Photoshop do not have, is this type paste lorem ipsum. So I'm going to do that now. And then it just pastes in a lot of Greek and Latin text called lorem ipsum. And this is just text that looks like English, but isn't actually, because it really looks nice for designs that you don't necessarily have text or copy for. It's great. As you can see, it's hyphenating a little bit there. So if I turned hyphenate off, it would stop doing that for me. Up to you again if you want it on. And then I can change my paragraph styles this way and make it look quite nice. Again, I can move this around. I could go back over to character. I could change the size, make it plenty bigger, make the spacing in between the rows higher. Let's go 200 even. Could make it really high. Or we could just do auto, which is where it would look quite nice. We could go back over to paragraph. We could uncheck hyphenate, go over to character, make everything caps, make everything not caps. All kinds of stuff that you can do with the character in the paragraph window in Photoshop. Something else that you might need to know in Photoshop with dealing with type is if we have our type tool selected, you can see up here again that we have a lot of tool options, okay? And these are really important because they do a lot of interesting things. Again, we have quick paragraph things, which we can change how our text is aligned, left, centered, or right. We have something over here called anti-aliasing, and this is just how our letters appear solely in Photoshop. So if I was wanting to make them look stronger or smoother, I could do that, and there are these presets. And you'll see that if you're using different fonts, this really looks different on different fonts. And so I always like to make sure that I have this set on whatever looks best. You can see if I put none, it does look a little strange. So I think I really liked the original setting, which was sharp. But again, each font is different and behaves different with this anti-aliasing feature. So it's up to you to kind of select the one that you think looks best for whatever font you're using. And again, I can change this font size up here as well, which is helpful. I can change the font that I'm using specifically. Over here we have kind of a funny feature, which is toggling the orientation of the text. So if I click it, you can see that the text is going this way randomly, which I never need my text to go this way, but you do have that option if you need to, and you can quickly toggle back and forth with this or text toggle orientation button. Lastly, we have this warp text button, which creates warped text. So in order to show you that, I'm just going to do one simple line of text. I will delete this text I have here and just type something here. Go back to my Move tool and kind of move this into the center of my window, my Photoshop canvas here. Okay, so if I just need to go back to the Type tool, and then go to create warped text. So now I get this warped text window, and I'm just going to kind of slide it over here, and I can select all of these funny things that I can do with text. I specifically like arc or arch because I think it can be used subtly. If you see, it just by default goes to 50, but if you do something a little subtle like 6 or 10 even, it just does a little bit of an arc. Again, there are other things that we can do here, and these are really fun to play around with, but they generally kind of make things look like Microsoft Office in the 90s. So be very, very careful with what you do with warping text, and proceed with caution for sure. But that is how you do the warp text trick. And I think that's it for creating text in Photoshop. It's all really easy and fun to do. I really highly encourage that you play along with changing your fonts, changing your sizes, and doing some warping tricks and seeing what happens. I can't wait to see what you do with your final project.